Welcome to the party. I'm not here right now, but I want you to listen very carefully. These guys are very funny, so pay attention. Enough talk. It's showtime.
Hello and welcome to Bags of Action. My name's Steve, my co-host is Pete.
Hello.
This episode we're talking about another old school classic film. This is Robocop from 1987. Oh, is it 88? Because in the UK it was released in the 88, but I think in America it was 87.
Yeah. Do you remember that we're old enough to remember when films came out 1 or maybe even 2 years later in the UK than the US, rather than a week or month before as they do now?
Yes. We are both old enough to remember that. But there you go. That's what we're going to be talking about this episode. However, before that, what news, Pete?
Well, 2 of the biggest action movie franchises of all time look like they're on their way back to the big screen for their 5th outings. One is Lethal Weapon.
Okay.
And the other is Indiana Jones. Although there's a little bit of a difference because some news has come out today. So Richard Donner is apparently going to return to Merton Riggs. So I think that he'll have done all 5 films, same director.
Yep.
However, Steven Spielberg today stepped down as the director of Indiana Jones 5.
Oh.
He's going to produce it. And it's rumoured that the Logan director, James Mangold, might take his place.
Okay. That's interesting, right?
But I saw an interview yesterday, I think it was, with Harrison Ford, who said he wanted it to be more like a Marvel movie. And I thought that feels like a clickbait headline. So I read on, and what he basically said was where the Avengers, particularly the most recent Endgame, worked well, was everyone had a film in their head they were expecting, but they gave them something else. And it really worked, but it wasn't what everyone... They gave them what they needed, not what they wanted.
Yes, what they
and he wants things that Indiana Jones should do the same. Not give people what they're expecting, but do something that kills it, was his exact expression. He's changed as he's got older, I think. But yeah, so he wants to kill it. So there we go.
Well, he does seem fond of killing off his characters, doesn't he?
That's also true. That is also true.
Who knows? But
yeah, but I don't know. I mean, weird about Steven Spielberg, but James Mangold is a really good director. But I guess I don't know. I don't know who. We shall see. But it's already been delayed. It was supposed to come out this year, and now they're saying it'll come out next year. But you've got to make it first.
Yes, this is true. So my bit of news is about another film franchise that we're big fans of, that we speculated whether or not they would do another film.
Ooh.
This is Creed 3.
Oh, okay. Gosh.
Yes. So a writer has now been hired to pen the script for Creed 3. Obviously, at this early stage, there isn't any details whatsoever, and there's no director attached because the first Creed film was Ryan Coogler, and the second one was Stephen Caple Jr. So it could be someone completely different again. However, all we do know is that the new film will continue the story of Adonis Creed. And what I didn't realize until I looked it up was that the 2 films... so the first Creed film earned $173 million US dollars, and the second one earned $214.
Yeah, I think the first one did really well with people watching it at home.
Yeah.
And it went on Netflix really quickly. So I think a lot of people saw it and then went to see it. Also, I didn't realize until the other day, there was a Twitter poll of what is the best boxing film of all time. And lots of people said Rocky IV. Probably just because it was out at the time they were the right age. So I think that the ties to Rocky IV, the Dolph Lundgren factor, I think possibly may. I know people that went to see Creed 2 that hadn't seen the first one. So yeah, but that may well be why. Okay. So Bridget, I don't know, Mr. T in the next one would be great.
I don't know. But given that it's Adonis again, I think we said it might just be that it's moved on and it'll be his story now, completely his story, no shadows from the past, but I don't know.
Yeah. I'm still, I love the first two, so I'm happy to watch it. That's for certain.
Well, I guess we'll see if it gets any further, but they do have a writer, so that's some progress.
Cool. So my other bit of news was about, there's so much content these days. Like years ago, I'd hear about things way, way before they were being developed even. Yeah. And now it's like, this Netflix has set a date for this film. And I'm like, didn't even know it existed. So there's a new film coming out in April called Extraction. Starring Chris Hemsworth. Now, it's an adaptation of a Joe and Anthony Russo, the Russo brothers who've done Marvel movies. It's a comic series they did for Only Press with Andy Parks and Fernando Leon Gonzalez. The comic was called Ciudad. That's probably wrong. Right. But they've adapted it. One of the Russos is writing it. They're not directing it. It's about a mercenary who travels to one of the most dangerous places on Earth to rescue the kidnapped son of a powerful crime lord. And the mercenary is Chris Hemsworth. That sounds rather good to me.
Yeah, that does sound good.
Actually, the director, I'm not sure of his name, but he was the stunt coordinator on Atomic Blonde and the last few Avengers movies.
Okay.
Sounds like it will have plenty of action in it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll have to check it out when it arrives. Right, shall we crack on with the main?
Yep, let's go.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about Robocop from 1987/88, depending on where you live in the world.
Yeah.
So before we get into it, when was the first time you saw this? Can you remember kind of how old you were and how many times have you seen this?
This is it's just confessions of old people. I think I've seen it twice.
That's it?
I think that's it, yeah. I've seen all three of the movies and I think a bit of the TV series. But I think the first time was probably on VHS, maybe with my older brother. So I'd have been about 14, maybe 15. Mm-hmm. And yeah, then the other time I think it was probably a heavily edited version on TV. And I played the side-scrolling game. I don't know if that counts.
Yeah, we all played that.
Okay.
So no.
But the difference is you probably completed it.
Yes.
There, you see.
I did.
I knew it.
My childhood, yes, is different to other people. I've seen this film, I'm going to say like 5 or 6 times maybe.
Okay.
Maybe 7 times. I've seen it at least 2 or 3 times on TV, that's for sure, with the kind of edited version cut down and, dubbed the swearing and that kind of thing. But I'm sure I've seen it a couple of times on DVD and VHS before that, for those who are old enough to remember.
Yep.
I've also seen a lot of the other Robocop stuff around it. So I've seen the 3 films. I saw the TV series that they went on to create with Robocop and Robocable, let's not forget. And I played the games, obviously, and I even watched, to my shame, the new Robocop film.
I haven't seen that. So that's interesting.
Okay. It came out in 2014. Gosh. It would be interesting to see what you make of that with Joel Kinnaman in the lead role.
I like him.
As I do. I think he's very good. I've been watching him most recently in Altered Carbon and really enjoying his performance, and also Hannah. One's on Sky, one's on Amazon, one's on Netflix.
It's on Netflix, yeah. I've fit in both camps, as it were.
But, yeah, the new film... Anyway, we're stuck about the old film, the original, the classic.
Exactly.
So this was directed by...
Paul Verhoeven, who went on to do very similar things in Total Recall, Starship Troopers. He kind of has that social commentary, almost satire, action sci-fi genre, almost of his own, which I didn't realise until watching this again, quite how much of my own writing has been influenced by his work, because there's quite a lot of similarities on stuff. But I always assumed that this was written by some big names, and I forget, like Frank Miller wrote the second and the third movie, the comic writer.
Yeah.
But this was written by an unknown called Edward Neumeier. He was a screenwriter, gone to be a producer and director. He wrote this. He also wrote Starship Troopers, so I'm guessing he's friends with Paul Verhoeven.
Yep.
And then he wrote the sequel to Starship Troopers, and he directed the third Starship Troopers movie. And it was co-written by Michael Miner, who I think did some like punch up to the script, like rewrites. And all he's really written since is Lawnmower Man 2 and a sci-fi thriller I've never heard of called Deadly Weapon.
Okay. Well, Edward Neumeier has basically done everything to do with Robocop. If you look at his IMDb page in terms of writing credits, he's done everything. Like every TV series, every like reboot thing they did in the 2000s. He's done games, and he's involved in Robocop Returns, which has been announced.
What's that?
It's the new Robocop film, which they're talking about, where it's Murphy and possibly getting his nibs back, Peter Weller, as the role as Murphy.
That would be good.
So it's a case of almost what they're doing with Terminator, where we're going to ignore everything else, and we're going to ignore the third one, and we're going to have, like, what would happen if Robocop has been in the suit as a cop for 30 years, or 25 years since the last one was made, and his body has, what's left of his body, has aged, but the world has changed. How does he fit into that world now, still being the only, probably, cybernetic, cyborg human police officer? What's that person like? What is that, with the way technology is now, and social media, and 24 news cycle, and, you can't just go around blasting people away, and all this kind of stuff. So, that's very interesting if they get Peter Weller back for it. And to have the original writer in again as well. That's intriguing.
That is interesting.
But to be fair, he also did work on the 2014 one, so,
Okay.
We'll see.
Yeah, okay. So this has got a heck of a cast. It's got, well, it hasn't. It's got like the ultimate 80s kind of B-movie almost cast in many ways. So Peter Weller is Murphy, as you mentioned. Nancy Allen as Lewis, his partner. You've got Dan O'Herlihy as the old man. Ronnie Cox, who was also in Total Recall and Beverly Hills Cop. Kurtwood Smith, who's in Agent Carter, 24. Miguel Ferrer, who's in everything. Twin Peaks, Iron Man 3. Ray Wise, who's in Dollhouse, X-Men First Class. And then Paul McCrane is in it, who I went on to see an awful lot in ER.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So he's one of the... Yeah, he's in this as well. And you can kind of... It's a very, very, very 80s movie. Like, and then some, really. Because obviously there's the hair, there's the clothes, there's the vision of the future, which isn't that futuristic compared to the real future that we live in now. And it's very violent when it wants to be. And I guess in a way, it reminds me a bit of like, not the film, but more the book of V for Vendetta. It's kind of like it was the 80s, it was the Reagan era. Everything was being corporatized, military, everything. It was all about making money, and they kind of sent it up. And then fast forward to now, and there's quite a few things in this film that actually have happened, which is it's weird watching it now with a modern eye, because as a kid you're like, oh, look at these crazy things that will never happen, and then they kind of do. And they intersperse quite a lot of it with what feels like Fox News, where they kind of laugh about all the crises in the world and talk about OCP running hospitals and prisons and space exploration, which again also seems to be happening, and making profit from law enforcement and stuff. So yeah, it gets you in really quickly to the world and kind of what's going on.
But the weird thing is the film doesn't actually begin in the way that I remembered. I thought it went straight into problems in the city and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, no, it doesn't. It begins with an advert. It begins with them commenting on society and the way it's changed, and there's a lot of stuff with the news anchors. They kind of are in between, sections, and you're like, what's going on? And
the commercials as well. I'd forgotten there's the commercials that come up as well.
Remember? Like there's the nuclear disaster game where they're
which is like battleships. Yeah.
it's honestly, it's just bonkers. You watch it and you think, look, and I'm Casey Wong. I'd forgotten Casey Wong.
Oh, yeah.
One of the TV anchors.
Well, like a film, like I remember when District 9 came out thinking, well, this is so unique. And then now I'm like, well, it's not that unique. But it is like Verhoeven's got his own kind of way of doing stuff, which I think is it's a very different kind of, it's an outsider's view of America, really, which I think he does really, really well, particularly in what is a relatively, well, I guess it ended up being a relatively mainstream film because it didn't cost that much to make and it was really successful and really popular. So the police are going to go on strike, aren't they? Because police officers are starting to be killed.
So it's that thing of the company wants to make money from the police. They're not giving them enough bodies on the ground. They're running riot everywhere. They're causing problems in a particular part of the city. But of course, it's all been kind of orchestrated on purpose by OCP because they want to drive down the price of property in a particular area by letting crime run rampant. Then they can buy up a whole bunch of it cheap. And they keep talking about, we're going to have thousands of jobs by building this new thing.
Delta City,
the new part of the city. But of course, in order to make it derelict, they need to make people drive out of there and drive them away from that area. So they have let crime run rampant. And then when the cops say they want more bodies or this or that, like, nope, sorry, can't help you.
Yeah. It's not very nice.
It sounds very cutthroat. And you're like, they'd never do that. And you're like, well, I think I've seen people do it or get very close to doing it.
That's I'm sure there are documentaries out there which may kind of get you close to this kind of thing. So, and that's what I think. Again, as a young teenager, this was possibly the first film I'd seen that did what sci-fi does best, which is holding a mirror up to the world and what's wrong with it. And it blew my mind. Not enough to watch it more than twice, but it kind of. I think I was just so taken aback by how upfront it was with its message.
Yeah.
Really, because it is essentially it's nearly it's a film about a guy who is a Robocop, and it's a very human story about him. But at the same time, it's a film about corporate greed. And about how people will treat each other, and actually how the people in the company are more ruthless in many ways than the criminals that they've hired. And I'd forgot, there are so many good lines in this film. I mean, there was a whole subgenre of music in the 80s of different kind of dance and rap records that sampled bits of this movie.
Right.
So the 20 Seconds to Comply scene is much earlier in this film than I realised.
Yeah.
And that kind of sets the whole tone for the film, which is corporate greed, willing to kill people, clean up the mess and move on as long as you get promoted.
Yeah. I mean, I'd forgotten a lot of bits and pieces from this film. So I'd forgotten that it starts with an advert. I'd forgotten they keep being interspersed. I remember I'd buy that for $1.
Yeah. That's what the other ones.
And laughs at. I'd also forgotten how quickly Murphy dies because it's he's transferred into the station and it's on his first day out.
It is
his first bloody trip with Louis.
Yeah. But I think it's really clever because watching it again now and you go, the traditional Hollywood thing would have been to have 15 minutes of him at home, get to know his family, get to know him, which is what you're all told to do in screenplays. But what's really good about this is only she will recognise him once it's happened because they haven't seen his face very often. Because that, despite what Judge Dredd and things make you think, you're going to on Batman, you would recognise somebody's face from the nose down if you knew them already, I believe, personally. So they don't really know him. And also, I love the fact you only see his previous life through his eyes later. I think it's really bold. That he is this new guy that isn't part of it. And I'd forgotten how, as soon as he did what he does with the gun, I knew that was going to obviously be how she'd recognise him later. But it's quite subtly done-ish.
There's not a lot of fat on this film. I mean, the fact that he's killed really, really quickly, and then they kind of go into the process, and then there's all the corporate stuff. I'd forgotten that it just kind of moves very well from A to B to C. It just kind of, there isn't, as you say, the setup and then the development of character, and then we've been working together for years. I've known Murphy for donkeys. Like no, He's just come in. It's his first day. He's come down here because the only reason he's transferred is that he's told to go there by OCP. And he says, well, I'll just go where the work is. And he's there to do a good job.
Yeah.
And he's a good cop.
And he's there because someone's partner's been killed.
Yeah.
You know, and it sounds like that happens a lot because she's like, I'll drive. And he goes, well, I tend to drive when I've got a new partner. So it's not like most procedurals where they build this lifelong friendship and, you know, and probably one of them will die and it'll be terrible. It's more about actually, do you know what? It's much more like a freelance job almost. You just move into the place you needed. What I really liked, particularly for a film of its time, is how they even refer to Lewis, I think, as a complete badass when she beats the heck out of the criminal at the start, and you get to see that she can handle herself. She isn't some damsel in distress being protected by Robocop. She is a very capable police officer in her own right.
Yeah, because there's a guy kicking off in reception, and no one jumps over the desk to help her. They just watch, and they just kind of like wait for it, and they just watch as she just takes this guy apart, and he's like, "Okay, now book him in, thanks," because she knows what she's doing. You know, she's been there a while. Whereas Paul Murphy dies the first day on the job in this new area of southwest part of the city. So. Yeah, it was really quite shocking that that's how fast it happened to him.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, again, most films would be like, are OCP good or bad? Are they benevolent? Maybe there's something going on. Or there's this person behind the scenes. Here they go, right, these are the people, they're the bad guys. These two in particular are worse than the others, and there's a rivalry. Because that 20 seconds to comply scene, I think, is brilliant. It is, you know, you bring out the kind of almost stop motion Ed 209 robot, which is it Jones's plan, isn't it, to bring that out, and Robocop is kind of the secondary. And it's just, you know it's not going to work properly, and the guy puts his gun down, and it's like, you have 15 seconds to comply, and that was definitely a playground thing of people who were arguing, giving each other 20 seconds to comply. I'm sure it was from memory. But yeah, he's not just shot; he is absolutely riddled with holes. And people do kind of just get on with their business, really.
As Jones says, who cares if it works? We're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to sell it to the army, and it's like, wow, he just doesn't care. He just wants to make money for the company however he can by selling them stuff that, isn't going to help the police, isn't going to help the army, but he's like, well, we can sell it here and sell it there, and we'll sell loads of them. And it just goes horribly wrong, which is the only reason that Morton's character, Miguel Ferrer's character, is able to then put the Robocop program into effect and say, no, all you have to do is wait for some poor fool to die. And it's like, that was quite quick.
Yeah. And he can handle himself with a gun, which was, they set up quite a lot because you don't see him for very long. We find out he's got a son and a wife. Not that we meet them at all. And he does this thing from, I can't which Western.
It's like a space TV show.
Yeah,
and he's a space cop guy.
Yeah, so he spins his gun and puts it in its holster, which again is some good foreshadowing for what comes later.
Yeah. There's just the arguments between the people, the fact that Clarence ended up working with Dick Jones, which I'd forgotten at first.
Yeah.
Then he goes back to him and says it's failed. But he said, look, we're going to need this. We're going to build Delta City. It's going to have drugs. It's going to have prostitution. We're going to need someone to run it. And it's like, so even though OCP are technically trying to create crime so they can build Delta City, once it's built, they're planning to then run crime through Clarence. And it's like, wow, Dick Jones is so corrupt. It could almost
be a perpetual loop. You just do that until it's a slum. Once it's a slum, you sell it off cheap, you just build it back up, and it's like, it's money for forever, really. It's the corporate side of it, I don't remember being quite such a big thing. I can remember kind of again, maybe it's just because I was so young, I can remember kind of him going up against this particularly kind of violent group of criminals, but I'd forgotten how much it was woven into the fabric of OCP.
I think it's part of the thing that when we're younger, you're not focusing on that. You're focusing on the action. Like when I went to see one of the Avengers films, I could hear one of the kids getting bored and fidgety, and at one point said to his mum and dad something like, "When to get back to the fighting?" Because they're doing the talky bit, and he wasn't interested in that. He wanted to see Hulk punching people. He wanted to see Captain America throwing a shield. And it's almost that thing of we watched it when we were a lot younger, and we're not focusing on the politics and the commentary on society and what it means and, how does it relate to the present. No, we want to see Robocop shoot criminals. That's why we're there. That's why we've turned up.
Yeah, there's other there's things like, again, watching it with an older head, the camera work in this film is way ahead of its time. So once he's in it's brilliant the way that they kind of do it. So we're jumping around, but once Murphy's killed, spoiler, and he's brought back as Robocop, you just see him flatline, and then you slowly get to you get nothing, then you get some static, and then it's almost like we are in his shoes, seeing the first things he sees, and they use POV really well, quite a lot. There's other things they do, like there's a scene where in the gents' toilets where Jones overhears Morton talking about him. Yeah. But they film it from in the toilet cubicle, so you can see his feet to know that someone's listening. And it's the kind of thing that things like Breaking Bad get all these awards for. It's like, they're filming it from inside the fridge. It's amazing. But like this kind of stuff, I think Verhoeven had done that. It's not how other people were filming things.
No,
and again,
in the 80s.
Yeah, and as a teenager, you're like, whatever. Someone's dropped the camera on the floor. Whereas, why can't you see his face? But now it's just like, do you know what? This is like really, really cleverly done to put you in his shoes as he's going through this transition. He doesn't know what he looks like. He doesn't know what he's doing. So I thought that was really good. But I guess we should probably go back to how, because him being killed is still pretty brutal, even watching it now.
Just before you go on to that, I was going to say, talking about the POV thing, I was going to comment on that.
No,
it's fine. As you said, you see it from his point of view, and like the testing period when they're saying, tracking, do this, do that, and they set up a grid. And do you know what I thought, having watched it? And this only came to me watching it recently, and it's because of the last 10 years and the Marvel films. I thought, if they remade it, or in the new remake that they're coming to do, I wonder if they'll do in the helmet stuff like they did with Iron Man.
Yeah.
Because
it would make sense.
The way they did it in the 80s was that the camera was his eyes, and, we couldn't... I think only occasionally he looked down and saw his own hands, but I don't even think it was very often. But my feeling is a new way to do it would be to do the kind of Iron Man thing where it's not quite the same, but he will have like a tack grid and he'll have like information scrolling down. Whereas in the old days, it was text on the screen to try and simulate that the actual cinema screen is his screen. And it's kind of, that's all they could do then. But now there's a lot cleverer ways of doing it, like the Iron Man within the helmet stuff.
Yeah.
And heads-up display properly and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, makes sense.
Like you'd have a sat-nav thing on one side. He's searching through the database through Bluetooth or something else to match someone's face. Over there, he's got guns and whatever else on his display. Yeah,
because watching it now, obviously there's things. A lot of his thing is basically to be able to shoot at the right person and follow these directives, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But then when he wants information about them, he has to go and plug his spiky finger thing into a computer and then check through records, whereas all that could easily be in his helmet. But it was 1987. I don't think I'd even got my Amiga yet, so I get it. There's
no internet, there's no Bluetooth, there's no mobile phones.
No.
None of this existed when this film was made, which kind of is hard for some people to grasp. But we didn't just sit around playing with sticks during the 80s.
Speak for yourself.
I had a hoop and a stick.
Oh gosh, you were spoiled.
Heck me.
A lump of coal.
Anyway, you wanted to go back to his grisly and brutal death.
Yeah, you know me.
For a laugh.
But I'd forgotten it is kind of, there's black humour in this, which feels even more black watching it again, to the point it may not even be humour, but they're pretty brutal. But I mean, they find them. They don't wait for backup, and they kind of go on in, which is kind of, I guess.
There is no backup. They said there's no one.
No. Well, yeah, of course. I suppose they're about to go on strike. There aren't enough people, so they got the option of leaving it or not going in. I completely forgot that she blew bubble gum, which is what gives her position up.
Yeah.
And there's a really strange scene where a guy's peeing and then kind of tries to make her look at his penis, and that's what distracts her, which I don't remember.
Well, no surprise. Okay.
No, because you went on her POV, I guess.
Thank God for that.
And another, there's even here he says one of the iconic lines from the film before he's RoboCop, which again is how some of them work out who he is later. When he says, "Dead or alive, you're coming with me," which again I think he's also taken from the TV show maybe that his kid watches because no one else says it. But it's very there's a kind of archetypal thing about Murphy that kind of transfers into when he's RoboCop, and you get to see basically Kurtwood Smith, Ray Wise, all the kind of main characters. But they don't just they shoot his hand off.
Yep.
They say give the man a hand. Hilarious. They shoot his arm off, and then they shoot him a ridiculous amount of times.
Yeah.
And then just a final shot in the head because
From Clarence,
they got stuff. They got other stuff to do.
Yeah.
And then we're straight to the hospital and said, and then straight to his POV as RoboCop. And so what I really liked, they didn't cut away. They didn't have people discussing the plan to bring a RoboCop. They didn't have him being selected. No. None of that gubbins. They just were like,
Straight
well, we've told you there's going to be a RoboCop. We said someone needed to die. We've just shown you someone dying. You don't need to think much more.
Yeah.
Here he is.
Yeah. So I've watched a few documentaries and I've watched a few talks that Peter Weller has done about how he moves as RoboCop and the making of. In some ways, this is one of those films that lots of things we talked about, like with Predator, lots of things went wrong when they were making it. And despite all of that, it came out as a triumph. This was another film that nearly failed many, many times for various reasons. And one of them was that it was almost impossible for Peter Weller to move in the suit that they originally built for him. Have you heard about this?
No.
So, originally he had this really, really almost like a diving suit, rubber suit underneath. And then on top of that was the kind of the metal, what looks like the metal kind of, shell that was put on. And the rubber thing, I think, was supposed to have like a cooling thing running through to keep him, from overheating because he was sweating so much. When you see Peter Weller at the start of the film, you actually realise he's not that big a guy.
No.
He's quite petite, but he's quite a slender guy.
He's tall and thin, I think.
Yeah. He's not tall. He's reasonable. He's a reasonable average height.
To you, Steve, he's not that tall.
Yeah,
in acting circles, if he's 5'8", he's tall.
Well,
how tall is...
Technically, it says he's 6 foot, according to...
Well, there you go. That is tall.
Anyway. But he's quite a slender guy, which I'd forgotten about, because the minute he bulks up and puts all the stuff on, he looks enormous. Robocop looks terrifying, because he's got really broad shoulders and everything's really bulky. But under there is quite a slender guy who's got this suit on and has got this plating on. And when they originally put him in it, he could barely move. And he struggled to move, and he was kind of like the old dance from the 80s, like, the robot. He was essentially having to move like that or move really quick, and it wasn't working, and they were losing time. And so he asked the director, I think it was the director, he wanted to bring someone in to help him. And the guy that they brought in, I think it was French. There's a talk that Peter Weller has done on YouTube about this, but he brings this guy in. I think he was almost like a mime artist or something. And he was a professional clown, as in not someone who painted his face, but he'd taught others clown school and those kind of stuff. And he said, right, what I want you to do, I'm going to help you. They cut lots of parts out of the suits. They cut out the knees, they cut out the elbows, they cut out like some of the ankles, so he had movement in the joints. They ripped other sections out underneath so he could move parts of his body and other bits they couldn't. Like, you never see RoboCop move certain parts on purpose, the way they kind of did it. And then they said to him, right, to Peter Weller, I want you to move everything really slowly and articulate it. So when you see him doing the weird things...
It's very deliberate.
Some of it is that he can't do it because of the way the suit is built and he's squeezed into it. And part of it is very, very deliberate. So when you watch him walking, you'll notice it's really, really particular. And there's a great moment that exaggerates some of these things. So when he's got, he's in the drug warehouse and he's going around shooting everybody, he does this really interesting thing that I kind of remembered. So when you see him shoot someone, he almost strikes a weird pose. Have you noticed?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Almost
so
like
he'll move one arm, and then he'll move the arm with the gun and fire, and then he'll move again, like it's almost like a kata or part of a karate thing.
Yeah.
And you'll watch him move, and it's absolutely fascinating when you find out the mechanics that went in because of luck, bad luck.
Yeah.
People who trained him, people who worked with him, time lost on the film, and just like they'd gone over budget and they needed more money to do this kind of stuff, and it's a miracle that it worked. Really,
the interesting thing for me, because I think the sound design of when he walks is brilliant.
It's amazing.
It's iconic. As soon as I heard that, I was like, okay. You get these iconic lines I mentioned before, but then you hear the sound of him walking and the weight of the suit, but also this kind of. And you suddenly the whole film comes flooding back. That is really good sound design.
And the music, the iconic music, like it just tells the story. It's so good. The rise of him when he starts taking people out. Just the way, as you say, he moves.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic.
He's currently 5'10.25", which is exactly the same height as me. He was 6'125", but he says he's been shrinking.
Well, yeah. He's how old
age.
now, though?
Yeah, well, no, in 1988 he said he started shrinking.
Okay.
So a year after this role, maybe because of how he had to stand while this was being filmed.
He is 72 now.
Gosh. You know.
So
Patrick Stewart's 79. He's running around.
Exactly. This is it. We've had Serene McKellen running around as wizards and Gandalf and Magneto, and now Patrick Stewart's running around as a cop. So, but then again, in the suit, it would be a case of, well, what's aged? His face might have sagged a bit, but then again, that's fine. His brain's still in the jar, essentially, in a metal suit. So, what does it matter? So it's a case of he becomes a man out of time. Despite being high tech.
Or even, because you're only seeing his chin, you could build that chin in CG. He could voice it, and he could have never aged.
Perhaps, but if he's got organic parts,
I don't know. He's also died.
Well, I think they're just going to ignore that part.
Do they not put a pause on your deterioration once you've been pickled and put in a metal suit?
Has he been? Yeah, has his? Anyway, we know that he has to eat baby food. Remember, essentially.
That's true.
To kind of keep those parts going. I forgot when Johnson's like, tastes pretty good. He's like, well, knock yourself out. And just start eating it, going, this is lovely. Anyway.
So he gets, again, the things that are coming later do get quite telegraphed, particularly, but it's okay. So you are Prime Directive 1, 2, and 3 are pretty standard police stuff, and then the fourth directive is a secret.
Classified to begin with.
Classified, yes. It comes up. I don't know why I need to tell him on his screen. He's got it's mainly for us. I think it's for the people at home.
Yes, yeah.
And then things happen really quickly. This one, as you say, it's a very fast ride. So it's not long after this. This first time he's on the shooting range, all the cops are there to see him. He's got amazing accuracy, as you'd expect with his tracking system. But Lewis and us see him spin the gun, so she knows as soon as he gets there, because he's been sent to the same precinct, that she's got a very, very strong suspicion that it's Murphy.
Yeah, she sees the gun, and I think she just keeps staring at him straight away and thinking something. And it's the voice, because it is still his voice, even though it's been
with a bit of
modulated a bit. Do you remember what the prime directives are?
No.
Serve the public trust, protect the innocent, uphold the law. Those are the three. And then the fourth was any attempt to arrest a senior OCP person results in immediate shutdown.
Yes, but we don't know
Dick
that.
Jones had snuck in without any of the others knowing. That was his contribution behind the scenes.
I'm guessing you knew those three directives not from your notes, but from them coming up on screen while you loaded the game.
I did play the game a fair bit, but I think it's probably somewhere in the back of my brain. That's where it's from.
It's subconscious with your fourth directive.
You don't want to know what my fourth objector is.
I really
tell you.
don't.
It's classified.
No.
It's classified, Pete. Can't tell you.
So he's very good at being a Robocop. Because he goes off and Robocop straight away, and he stops a robbery in a store. I love store robberies.
Yeah.
They don't do them in films anymore much, but most films, I was probably a year and a half where every film I watched started with a robbery in a shop.
Yeah.
Definitely. And so he does that. He handles that very, very quickly and easily.
Mm-hmm.
He stops a lady who's going to be raped by shooting between her legs through a skirt, which I think she shoots too high. I don't think that shot works. And then I'm not an expert, and he has got a tracking system. He's a Robocop. I'm not a Robocop.
Yep.
And then a hostage situation with is he a civil servant, I think?
Yeah.
Or
You've got the mayor. I think it's the mayor, I think.
Yeah. He sort of completes Die Hard in about 4 minutes.
Does. Yeah.
Pretty much, which I think is really good because it's that they're all kind of three standard situations from other action movies from the same kind of time. But it's like, this is how good he is. He's just done these three things. And then the news is like very positive. It's like, yeah, there's this Robocop and he's amazing. And they turn to some kids in some Vox Pops and go, he's like you've only seen in comic books. And I'm thinking, because there's lots of rumors that Judge Dredd was a big influence on this movie.
Right.
I guess just because he wears a helmet, and
right,
I guess he is judge, jury, and executioner to a certain extent as well.
I'm not Judge Jury, Judge Judy.
But, did I say Judge Judy?
No, I didn't.
He is Judge Judy and executioner. That's a different film, which I think we should make.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. Yes, I don't quite think it's because of Judge Dredd. I think it's one of these things that. So it's like when they developed Terminator movies, the original Terminator, they then had to go back and say, well, actually, and you notice in the credits for that, you can see that it's based upon a short story from Harlan Ellison, and they had to give him credit for it because that's where it came from. With this, okay. I don't think it was anywhere near that. Well, we based it on Dredd because it's.
Well, according to Robocop, not Robocop, he didn't tell me. He's like, just wanted to tell you, you've got 20 seconds to read this Wikipedia article.
Okay.
According to Wikipedia, which obviously is crowdsourced information, so it could be nonsense. It does say that it was influenced by Judge Dredd and a Japanese. I've lost the piece of the page. It was originally inspired by the poster for Blade Runner.
Blade Runner? There's no one in
the poster, just the poster. Just the poster.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, according to this, by something from Space Sheriff Gavin from Japan. Well, I can see that having looked at the picture. And ROM, the Marvel comic series. Apparently, those three things were.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah.
And the son is reading the ROM comic in a flashback scene deliberately for that reason, apparently.
Okay. So it's not as much as a lift as Terminator was. But yes, influenced by and inspired by perhaps, but created something that's obviously quite unique, and it plays on lots of different things. And even then, I don't think it had any of the politics, corporate greed, comments on society, the media's power and influence as it had in this version, and I suspect future versions. And the idea of a cyborg is not exactly new either.
No, that's true. I mean, do you know who was originally going to be cast before Peter Weller?
Was it Tom Selleck?
No, it was not Tom Selleck. Rutger Hauer was one of the people favoured to play the part.
Right, yeah, I can see that.
And Michael Ironside. But their large frame were too big.
Yeah, well, that's exactly that. You would have had a absolutely giant version of Robocop at that point, especially with either of those. With Michael Ironside, he's a huge man.
And Stephanie Zimbalist was going to be Lewis, but she pulled out to be in Remington Steele.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
Which is just not a sentence I want to say ever again. Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Anything else we want to? We always jump around on these things.
Yeah.
I
like the way. Do you like the way that Robocop starts to kind of get his sentience back?
He starts dreaming.
Yeah,
he starts having nightmares, and they can't control him, which is quite good. They kind of say, like, stop. I want you to stop.
Okay.
Like, there's no voice command. No one's actually programmed that into him, which seems a bit silly. They've given him the prime directives, and so that's what he's doing. He starts chasing down his own murderers.
Yeah.
And replaying and trying to match faces and records. Like Dick Jones at one point says, "You idiot! He can record things. So of course we're gonna have to scramble his brain now because he's got evidence that's submissible in court," which is quite an interesting thing. I thought, he's thought that through, and the people who've made the film have thought that through. That somewhere in the law, even though it's run by OCP, they've said anything he records is admissible as actual evidence and therefore can be used to prosecute people. So it's one of these things, again, where they've thought of something, and then they've thought 2 steps beyond it to what you can actually do with it in that situation.
And I like the way kind of the 2 stories that there are kind of working in tandem. There's him kind of understanding who he is. Like Lewis calls him Murphy, but he doesn't recognize the name.
No.
But then he sees the first member of the gang at the gas station. Another classic line. Suppose you think it's pretty smart, huh? Think you can outsmart a bullet? I have said that to someone before, and then I realized I didn't have a bullet, so it was a pointless thing to say. Yes, and he starts to piece stuff together. He realizes he's got a home life, and he starts to get his humanity. But at the same time, we're starting to realize that the people he's after are not just going around killing cops for the hell of it. They're actually linked to OCP. So I think it's really clever how he's learning about himself as we're learning about the situation, really. Yeah,
and he starts to develop emotions because at that point he hasn't really had them as whatever he's, as you said, the robbery, the attempted rape, the stuff in the mayor's office. None of that has caused any emotion. It's only when he goes back to see his empty house, when he goes after a meal, and he starts to get emotional and gets frozen up. But he recovers really quickly. There again, in another film, he would have had the gas station thing, and then it would have been like 20 minutes later. He's like, no, he clicks back in pretty quick and just walks out the gas fire without it exploding. Without it killing him, even though the whole place goes up and the college guy escapes and stuff. But they just kind of move stuff on really quickly. Even though the film is less than 2 hours, 1 hour 45, it never feels slow and it never feels like it's dragging or treading water.
No, there's no scenes that are doing anything other than driving the story forward really quickly.
Yeah.
Which did make me laugh. In a world where we can FaceTime each other, it made me laugh that the timing that went into this scene in real life is, as the characters, like, right, okay, what I want you to do, I want you to go to Bob's house. He's going to be there with 2 models. What I want you to do is I want you to warn him. Then I want you to put this disc in. I'll then, on the video, tell him what's going on before you kill him. But you need to put the video on at exactly the right time so that it finishes when you pull the pin of the grenade.
Well, I think it was just he could watch the whole thing, really.
I suppose. But it's just funny. It's funny. At the time, it's like, it's a disc. You're going to put a disc in with a video. He's recorded it in advance, ready. And whereas now, you could just, it's just funny to think of how little we had in those days.
Well, if you remember the point where Murphy goes back to his old house that's empty, is now up for sale, and you've got that kind of robot guy going, hello, welcome to the house. Well, this is a lovely kitchen. And it's like the oldest, shittest talking, recording person on the screen. You don't even have those now. Like, you never had them then. That was the only reason they had them in the film, because it was the future.
Yeah.
I love it. Not all of the developments came to pass, but that was an interesting one. An automated estate agent.
Indeed. Well, it might be more trustworthy. Sorry,
everyone.
Everyone. So the scene where, because he rapidly finds the people, because he's very good at being a Robocop. And when he finds Kurtwood Smith's character and the deal that they're doing, there's a guy in the background I'm pretty sure was in Hard Target as one of the hunters.
Right.
But I think it's that like 80s, early 90s, where if you're a large man who's in shape, you are going to be in a lot of these films.
Was our favourite in this? And if not, why not?
I don't think Sven Ole Thorsen was in this movie.
So there's a bit where Clarence goes to the drug dealer to talk to that guy and says, I'm going to take a load of your money and you're going to do this and we're going to work together. That's a weird scene as well, though. Only because Clarence is going, we're going to have the thing tonight. It's like, what? What is going on? Why is he being weird and jokey and letting the rest of the film he's really serious and dark. It was like an odd.
It was odd. There's one thing I liked in there, which was he says a line. I can't remember the exact line, but about business is where you find it. Mm-hmm. And you think that's quite an innocuous line, but that's how he's explaining it to this fellow kind of drug dealer. But it's actually a line that Jones said in his corporate speech at the start.
Yeah. When
Jones was presenting about how OCP works, he said, "Well, it doesn't matter which area we go into. Business is where business is where you find it." So I thought it was quite clever that by this point we already knew that he was working with him, but the fact that he did, to the point they had the same kind of mindset about stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then he just breaks down the door and comes in and shoots about 17 or 18 blokes.
Yep,
it's just perfect. It's just the way he takes them all out, and that's that thing, like I said, where someone's up high and you see him turn and point and shoot, and then he'll spin around and move his arm and his other arm, and it's just like this weird coordinated dance where there's no wasted motion. It's just like he's flowing from one thing to the next. And it's brilliant just to watch that scene. If you go back and watch it again, you'll see what I mean. But it's very precise placement of his hands, which I've not seen in before, really.
Yeah, and I think as well when he because he gets through them quite quickly and gets to Clarence Bodica really quickly, who apparently his glasses were styled on Heinrich Himmler.
Wow!
So he gets to him. And he's like, and it's not quite POV, but it's kind of a really close camera. You don't tend to see characters that close to camera, their face.
No.
Unless you're watching Les Miserables. So he's there, and it's really visceral. You're not quite being Robocop at that point, but you're kind of up close. And he takes him in, and then he just basically is like, a complete coward. Yep, I'm going to tell you everything about everyone. Immediately.
He's recorded him saying that I work for Dick Jones. I've got powerful people. You can't do this to me.
Yeah.
Don't you know who I am? It's like, well, you just told him, and he's recorded it. That's it, mate. You're done for now.
But he keeps saying he's protected. He's like, you're a cop. You work for OCP. So do I. And it's like it's almost as if you can talk around a robot to being on your side. But he takes him in, and he takes as soon as he says, "I want my one phone call," you know who he's going to ring.
Yeah.
And he rings Dick Jones, and then Murphy, Robocop, gets to Dick Jones, and Directive 4 kicks in, and that's when we find out that he can't arrest or harm anyone above a certain level in a flowchart in OCP.
Yeah, senior officers he's not allowed to. But, yeah.
And he sets Ed 209 on him, which reminded me of a film. Have you ever seen a film called Arena?
Don't think so.
Okay, that's like a fighting movie, but it's kind of like creatures and robots and stuff. But it's that kind of stop motion-y kind of Harryhausen kind of feel.
Right.
And it's like they're not very good at going downstairs. It's a bit like Daleks. They're not very good at going downstairs, and that's his downfall, really.
Yes, that's the end of Ed 209, really, which was fun.
But you get a thing again where, like, the cops don't want to go for Robocop, which I quite like the fact he's kind of won them over. But the military and stuff are there, or the OCP's people. But again, when he was a human, he was shot a ridiculous amount of times. And now that he's a Robocop, he's shot an even more ridiculous amount of times.
Yeah. But he doesn't fight back. In this case, he could have turned and killed them all, but he doesn't, because they're just doing their job, and they're all police officers or security, so he knows he can't. He runs because the alternative is to kill them, and he won't do that. He's still got. If he's becoming more Murphy, he's becoming more of who he was. He's still a good guy under all of the metal. It's his brain, his personality.
No, that makes sense. And then it all kind of flips because suddenly it's like it's building to the ending. I guess it kind of. Dick Jones to tell Clarence he needs to kill Robocop. Then he'll be, like you said before, be handed all of the organised crime, and they get given this military weaponry. Which again, there's another weird scene. Really, is when they start shooting each other's cars up.
Yeah, and blowing up half the street and all that kind of stuff.
When everyone's on strike, it's just a bit a bit peculiar. So Lewis takes it to the old steel mill. You get the almost Terminator scene of him taking his helmet off, but he sees his face again. You see the face for the first time over his shoulder and in the reflection.
Yeah.
And I love this scene because he just asked if his wife about his wife and son, and then he's like, "I can feel them, but I can't remember them." It's just in such a full-on violent kind of satirical movie, you get this really warm heart and scenes between Murphy and Lewis.
Yeah. It's brilliant. It's such a good film. There's just so many. I mean, yes, it's over the top in places, and yes, it's commenting on all the kind of things to do with the media and stuff. But yeah, you get some cracking lines away from the well-remembered one-liners that people use all the time.
Yeah. And I think when you get this big scene, then he's at the steel mill. They're all coming there. What I quite like now is he hasn't got his helmet on anymore. So again, that transition of I'm Robocop is now I'm Murphy with an upgrade. He is, like you said, himself. He's pretty brutal with them as well. But the only thing I didn't remember the ending being quite so quick. It felt a little bit anticlimactic to me when they turn up because there's been a big thing about these big guns that they've got, but I guess he can handle himself, but it didn't seem that difficult.
Yeah.
Really. And they dropped for some reason I thought when they dropped girders on him that was going to be a magnet. I thought they were going to pick him up.
Oh, right.
But then I realised it was just girders, which shows again I haven't seen it enough times.
Yes. But he takes them all out. He's not arresting them this time. No. There's no arresting them. But I like the fact that she uses one of the guns on them. Lewis just kind of grabs one of the guns and fires, and she actually kills Ray Wise's character, Leon.
She does.
Just blows him up. And it's like,
after he dropped the girders, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely just blows him apart. It's like, whoops, oh well, that's it. End of you, mate.
And you get the Toxic Avenger kind of scene of Emil driving into toxic waste and then literally melting as he comes back out.
I read an interview with Paul McCrane in a book from a guy that you interviewed, Born to Be Bad, by Sai Singh. He spoke to Paul McCrane about that scene and said, it took him something like 3 or 4 hours to get all the prosthetics on. It's really uncomfortable, really hot, really sweaty. He said that he couldn't really complain, given that Peter Weller was, losing several pounds every day from sweat whilst wearing the Robocop suit.
Gosh.
And he didn't have to do it every day. He just did it for sort of 2 or 3 days as Emil's grisly, melted, toxic face.
Cool. So and then he's pretty much gone through them. There's the bit with Lewis. She doesn't become a Robocop in the other films, does she?
No,
but it makes you think she will.
Why?
Well, because she's been badly injured, badly shot. She's crawling along the ground, and she's like, "I'm done for." I can't remember what she says, and I'm falling apart. And he's like, "Don't worry, they'll put you back together." Or so he says something like,
"Yeah.
They'll fix you," and it made me think, well, it's going to be Robocop 2, which is going to be surely the two of them as partners, both Robocops.
But it's not.
But I know it's not. It's not. But it's Frank Miller wrote the second and third one, so maybe that was the plan. Maybe that was the plan. I don't know.
Well, spoiler.
I'm reading.
She dies in
what?
I think it's the second one or the start of the third one. So.
Well, that's just ruined that.
But they don't bring her back. He's the only Robocop. He's the only, because every time they try to do it, it fails after him. That's the point.
Right.
The second one, they have the guy who's controlled by the drugs, Nuke, and it's Tom Noonan. But the brain they use is the drug dealer who's a criminal. But they think that they can control him with this kind of souped-up Ed 209 thing by saying, look, we'll give you the drugs, you do as we say. And then, of course, he breaks his programming just so he can get the drugs by himself. They can't. They have to have a good man in the core in order to build something stronger and powerful, and it doesn't work. So they don't attempt to do it with another cop, probably because OCP wouldn't get away with it again, like they did. But it's only in the TV series later on you get Robocable, who's another cop, who's actually a good guy. But yes, I suspect in the new film he'll be the only one. They'll probably say it's probably banned after him, or anything kind of close to him was banned because of many ethical reasons of using a dead body and keeping it alive long enough to put it into a suit and stuff. So, but yeah, I'd be curious to see what they do with it, looking at it through a modern eye and a modern perspective.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Makes sense.
Right. Are we ready to give it a score?
I think so. I just want to say that what I did like is that all the way through he doesn't answer the name of Murphy, but then at the very end, when he shows the evidence of Dick Jones, which quite like the fact that corporate world then kind of turns on Dick.
Yeah.
And then he fires him, shoots him out the window, and then it's like, "Nice shooting, son. What's your name?" And he goes, "Murphy." And then it ends.
That's it.
The most abrupt ending ever. Murphy.
Brilliant.
End.
Yeah.
It's done.
But he says, "I can't hurt anybody if they're seeing you off," and he goes,
You're fired.
You're fired. He goes, "Thank you," because he knows. Thank you, and then he kills him.
Oh, that's funny. I was just reading here actually that one of the reasons for the commercials was this film was originally rated an X for violence, which is like, would have meant that hardly anyone saw it. So they recut it 11 different times, and it was the 12th time that it got downgraded to an R rating. But they put the commercials in and some of the more comedic scenes to try and balance out and make it seem more of a caricature kind of piece.
Wow. Okay. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. Anyway,
so
right,
we
let's do some scores.
ready. Let's do some scores. Nobody's going. Shall I go first?
Go on, Pete.
I'll go first. Go on then. So I haven't seen the remake because I don't think it was needed. I haven't seen this as many times as I thought I had actually. Now, in some ways, this is a big story about the US, about the future of law enforcement, about the all those kind of things. But it's also a small tale of one guy, which I really liked. I love the social commentary. The way it's filmed is really groundbreaking. The POV screen shots and the clever camera angles. So it's got a lot of heart. It's got some really powerful, violent, visceral action scenes which stay with you. As I said earlier, subconsciously, I think this film made a huge impact on me as a writer, which I never realised until I started thinking about all the things I've written pretty much since.
Yep.
So at the right age, it's iconic. The sound of his suit, the memorable lines. The ending is a little bit abrupt. Not just the specific scene, but I think the last act feels a little bit like they're just trying to get it finished, which is the only kind of slight drawback. And I don't know, I'm looking at like this Die Hard, Predator. So that final act probably makes it not quite perfect. So I'm going to give it 4 bags of action.
Okay. Right, okay. Yes, it is a while since I've seen this film. I'd forgotten little elements here and there. It's weird, something that you think you know so well, and then you go back and rewatch it, and it's all the things that you pick up beyond the main beats that I'm finding when I'm rewatching stuff, which just shows you kind of how much you actually retain on something. I enjoyed the quieter moments. I enjoyed the action scenes because I wasn't watching him kill people. I was watching how they did it, how they moved, how he worked with this suit and the restrictions, having done a bit more research on it in the last few years. It felt like a really tight film, very little fat. The technology obviously looks a bit dated. Then again, it was made in the 80s, so I'm kind of forgiving of that. And even the newer version that they did, some of that technology is probably gone in 7 or 8 years since it was made. So I don't think that's a barrier to someone younger nowadays watching this older version and enjoying it, because it's just a solid film. Everything's really good. There's nothing that I really dislike about it. I like the fact that it ends so quickly, and you almost get the kind of freeze frame ending with him just saying who he is. It's a really good film. I really like it. So I'm going to give it a solid 5 bags and say,
oh, nice.
I love it. It's one of these films that I would have in my collection. I think I have it in my collection somewhere. But this is currently on Netflix, which is where we both watched it. So
it's true.
Yeah, I'm going to give it 5. So that's it. So,
excellent.
Have you seen the original Robocop? If so, get in touch. Let us know what you think. Have you seen the remake? Have you seen any of the TV series that we've mentioned? And what do you think about them doing the new version with Murphy coming back and being an older version with Peter Weller perhaps resuming the role as Murphy? Get in touch in all the usual ways. Come on to email. You can come on the Facebook group. You can follow us on Twitter. Don't forget the YouTube channel. We have weekly 5-minute reviews on there, so check out those. And we'll be back soon with another episode. All right, Pete, wrap us up.
Thank you for listening, if indeed you still are.
Good
You
night.
have 20 seconds to comply.
Good night.
You have been listening to Bags of Action. No bullshit. You'd better stick around for the next episode, because if you're lying, I'll be back.